Hello, Academic Reading Across Disciplines class. This is an attempt to take a look at one of Jürgen Meltzer Sensei's History of Technology in Japan essays. So hopefully this will work. I tried over the weekend several times and continuously had difficulty getting the videos to work on my quite expensive iPad Pro. I think I've figured it out. It's a little bit counterintuitive, but let's take a look. Chapter 4, How do historians understand technology? The previous two chapters suggest that one must reject technological determinism and admit that the invention and the diffusion of technologies are not predictable. So I haven't actually heard the term technological determinism in the past, but I can guess what it means. I believe means that technology can be predicted through understanding the different flows and processes of society. But here it says that that is rejected as a possible way of understanding technology. So once again, the previous two chapters suggest that one must reject technological determinism and admit that the invention and the diffusion of technologies are not predictable. What do you think about that? Do you think the invention and diffusion of technologies are not predictable? I believe in my own life they've been quite unpredictable in some ways, but in other ways there is a level of predictability. For example, the iPad that I am working on is very similar to science fiction technology from the TV show Star Trek. And I think the fact that it was someone's idea in a fictional setting led to its development in the real world setting. I don't know if that would qualify as technological determinism in any way, or just the person who invented it in the science fiction context could be credited as having it having been the inventor of the idea originally. What is the alternative to technological determinism? Historians in the field give roughly equal weight to technical, social, economic, and political factors. So we've got, let me change color here. So other than technological determinism, we have technical, social, economic, and political factors. Their case study suggests that artifacts emerge as the expressions of social forces, personal needs, and technical limits, markets, and political considerations. They often find that both the meanings and the design of an artifact are flexible, varying from one culture to another and from one time period to another. Indeed, Henry Petrotsky, one of the most widely read experts on design, argues that there is no such thing as perfect form. Designing anything from a fence to a factory involving satisfying constraints, making choices, containing costs, and accepting compromises. Wow, this is a really complex bit of writing, isn't it? So their case study suggests that artifacts emerge as the expression of social forces, personal needs, technical limits, markets, and political considerations. So it's not determined by a technological determinism, but there are a variety of factors that lead to the development of artifacts. So artifacts, I think, would just be a term for any of the new inventions that happen to appear in this world over time. They often find that both the meanings and the designs of an artifact are flexible. I think this is a really important point. They're flexible, varying from one culture to another and from one time period to another. Indeed, Henry Petrotsky, one of the most widely read experts on design, argues that there is no such thing as perfect form. Designing anything from a fence to a factory involves satisfying constraints, making choices, containing costs, and accepting compromises. Technologies are social constructs. This is a really important point. Technologies are social constructs. Historians of technology have also generally agreed that after initial invention comes an equally important stage of development. Indeed, since the late 1960s, the study of development has been the center of much work in the field. For example, in studies of Nicholas Otto's internal combustion engine or the emphasizes that combustion engine or the development of the diesel engine. Nathan Rosenberg, a leading economic historian, emphasizes that for every new product or this is hard. There we go. Production technique, there's a large adjustment process during which the invention is improved, bugs ironed out, and the technique modeled to suit the specific needs of users, and the tooling up and numerous adaptations made so that the new product process can not only be produced, but can be produced at low cost. So there are two factors. It's not only important, the tooling up is to ensure that it can not only be produced, but can be produced at low cost. This is bringing in the economics of invention, I think, that they're intended to be, frequently intended to be profitable, or at the very least manageable in terms of the economics to create something. Indeed, during the shakedown period of early production, some feasible inventions are abandoned as unprofitable. As the study of development has increased, the heroic lone inventor has largely disappeared from scholarship. Anthony F. C. Wallace, a senior historian in the field, declared, "We shall view technology as a social product and shall not be overmuch interested in the priority claims of individual inventors." So, I guess the individual inventor, the lone inventor, as it were, has largely disappeared from scholarship. We shall view technology as a social product and shall not be overmuch interested in the priority claims of individual inventors. For the actual course of work that leads to the conception and use of new technology always involves a group that has worked for a considerable period of time on the basic idea before success is achieved. I wonder if that's true. I really wonder if that's true in modern times. I believe that someone could invent an app that would be extremely profitable and useful by themselves. I think this might be a more historical idea where creating a car couldn't be done on one's own. Variation in design continues during early stages of development until one design meets with wide approval. Once a particular design is widely accepted, however, variation in form gives way to innovation in production. Take the bicycle as an example. The earliest bicycles, high wheelers, those are the really funny ones you see in old movies, I think, with the giant front wheel and the smaller back wheel, were handmade and cost an ordinary worker a year's wages. Only the well-to-do could afford them. Most riders were young and male. The danger of toppling from a high wheeler gave bicycling a macho aura. For more than a generation, low-wheel bikes were for women, clergymen, and old people. Tremendous experimentation took place as inventors changed the size of the wheels, made three-wheelers, moved the larger wheel from the front to the back. Can the larger wheel be in the back? I'm even trying to imagine what that would look like. And tried out various materials, including wood and steel frames. They developed different drive and braking systems, tried various shapes, and with a padded seat, reduced discomfort from bumps and vibrations. At first, professional racers derided these balloon tires as being for sissies. Wow! However, bicycle design reached closure in the 1890s when low-wheel models with front and back wheels of equal size and fitted with Dunlop tires proved to be the fastest on the racetrack. Once the low-wheel safety bicycle had become accepted as the standard, manufacturing changed. The leading producers of high wheelers, such as the Pope Company, had prided themselves on durable construction by skilled artisans. An artisan is someone who makes something one at a time in a very careful way, taking a great deal of skill, who adjusted the wheel size of each cycle to match the length of the customer legs. In the 1880s, such bicycles cost $300 or more, well beyond the reach of the average consumer. In the 1890s, however, mass producers such as Schwinn made bicycles with stamped and welded frames. They were of lesser quality, but priced as low as $50. By 1910, a used bicycle in working order could be had for $15, and ownership had spread to all segments of society. So anyone could own one at that point. It went from an elite possession, a possession for only rich people, to one that anyone could enjoy. The bicycle had ceased to be a toy for the wealthy and had become a common form of transportation and recreation for millions. The military had adapted it to troop transport, delivery services had thousands of bicycle messenger boys, and bicycle racing had emerged as a professional sport. The social significance and use of the bicycle was not technologically determined. The social significance and use of the bicycle was not technologically determined. For example, from the beginning, some women adopted the bicycle, and during the era of the high wheeler, some joined the popular bicycle clubs. In 1888, 18 women were members of a Philadelphia club, and one of them won the Captain's Cup, awarded annually to the members who covered the most miles, in this case 3,304 and a quarter. However, women on wheels met opposition. Some physicians declared that the bicycle promoted immodesty in women and harmed their reproductive organs. So they said it was bad for women, and that it was bad for modesty. It was in some way obscene, and that it could damage them physically. Moralists thought women on bicycles were indecent because they wore shorter skirts to ride them, and worried that women would find straddling the seat sexually stimulating. I don't know why, especially in America and Europe, there's often a kind of prejudice against women based on fear of them being overstimulated or overstimulating. It is a really sexist attitude. The bicycle craze helped kill the bustle and the corset and encouraged common sense dressing. So the bustle and the corset were two older types of helped kill the bustle and the corset were two types of restrictive women's clothing and encouraged common sense dressing. Many in the women's suffrage movement adopted bicycles. In 1896, Susan B. Anthony declared, "Bicycling has done more to emancipate women than anything else in the world. I stand and rejoice every time I see a woman ride by on a wheel. It gives women a feeling of freedom and self-reliance." So Susan B. Anthony was a very famous women's rights activist, and she was actually on U.S. currency at one point. It was called the Susan B. Anthony dollar, and it was not popular. It was quite similar in shape to the quarter, quite similar in size to the quarter, and people would sometimes mistake it for a quarter, so it wasn't popular at all. I quite liked them. The women's movement embraced the bicycle, and its democratization became part of their drive for social equality. So democratization is something that brings equality to a system, brings democracy to a system. So many years ago, if you wanted to be a movie maker, you had to go to Hollywood or maybe Tokyo or maybe New York or London. But now with Netflix and YouTube and Amazon Prime and all of these other services, it has become somewhat democratized. You can do it on your own. You can do it with a smaller budget. More people are able to participate, which is basically what democracy is, having participation for most and hopefully all people. Outside the United States, the bicycle persisted much longer as an important form of transportation. In the Netherlands and in Denmark, bicycles were more common than automobiles were until the 1960s. In those countries, major roads have special lanes and special traffic signals for bicycles. Gosh, I wish Japan had that system. Instead of automobiles, special traffic signals for bicycles. And the government programs encourage citizens to use bicycles instead of automobiles. But most Western societies have chosen the automobile as the primary mode of transportation instead. And even in Denmark and the Netherlands, bicyclists are not as numerous as they were a generation ago. Despite the bicycle's head start on the automobile, in most societies, only the automobile seemed to achieve what Thomas Hughes calls technological momentum. Hughes argues that technical systems are not infinitely malleable. If technologies such as the bicycle or the automobile are not independent forces shaping history, they can still exercise a soft determinism, much like we discuss soft power these days a lot in the media. Once they are in place, technological momentum is a particularly useful concept for understanding large-scale systems such as the electric grid, the railway, or the automobile. In the Networks of Power, Hughes examines 5 stages of system development for the electrical grid, and these stages can apply to other inventions as well. In the case of electrification, the sequence began in the 1870s with invention and early development in a few locations, 1875 to 1882. That was followed by technology transfer to other regions, 1882 to 1890. With successful transfer came growth, 1890 onwards, and the development of subsidiary infrastructures of production, education, and consumption, leading to technological momentum after circa 1900, as electricity became a standard source of light, heat, and power. In the mature stage, after circa 1910, the problems faced by management required financiers and consulting engineers. Technological momentum is not inherent in any technical system. When first deployed, is not inherent in any technological system. When first employed, it arises as a consequence of early development and successful entrepreneurship, and it emerges as the culmination of a period of growth. The bicycle had such momentum in Denmark and Netherlands from 1920 until the 1960s, with the result that a system of paved trails and cycling lanes were embedded in the infrastructure before the automobile achieved momentum. In the United States, the automobile became the center of socio-technical system more quickly and achieved momentum a generation earlier. I would suspect that this is due to the large size of America as compared to the Netherlands and Denmark. The spaces which people had to traverse was so much greater that automobiles were more attractive earlier. So it probably would have been horses to cars rather than walking horses to bicycles, as it might have been in some countries. Only some systems achieve technological momentum, which Hughes has also applied to analysis of nitrogen fixation systems and atomic energy. The concept seems particularly useful for understanding large systems. These have some flexibility when being defined in their initial phases, but as technical specifications are established and widely adopted, and as a system comes to employ a bureaucracy and thousands of workers, it becomes less responsive to outside pressures. Hughes provided an example in American Genesis. The inertia of the systems producing explosives for nuclear weapons arises from the involvement of numerous military, industrial, university, and other organizations, as well as from the commitment of hundreds of thousands of persons whose skills and employment are dependent on the system. Similarly, at the end of the 19th century, once the width of railway tracks had been made uniform, and several thousand miles were laid out. Once bridges and grade crossings were designed with rail cars of certain dimensions in mind, it was expensive and impractical to reconfigure a railway system. Hughes makes clear when discussing inertia that the concept is not only technical, but also cultural and institutional. A society may choose to adopt either direct current or alternating current, or to use 110 volts or 220 volts, or some other voltage. But a generation after these choices have been made, it is costly and difficult to undo such a decision. Hundreds of appliance makers, thousands of electricians, and millions of homeowners have made a financial commitment to these technical standards. Furthermore, people have become accustomed to particular standards and soon begin to regard them as natural. Once building an electrical grid is less shaped by and more the shaper of its environment. Once built, an electrical grid is less shaped by and more the shaper of its environment. This may sound deterministic, but it is not entirely so, for people decided to build a grid and selected its specifications and components. To later generations, however, such technical systems seem to be deterministic. Yeah, so this is kind of, this is the interesting thing, when something, it has the appearance of determinism, but there's actually human choice behind it. The U.S. electrical system achieved technological momentum around 1900. By that time, it was reinforced with cultural context and interacting in a systemic way with the elements of the context. And like high momentum matter, it tended in time to resist change to the direction of its development. From 1900 on, growth was relentless and not easily deflected by contingencies. The electrical system was far more than machines themselves. It included utility companies, research laboratories, regulatory agencies, and educational institutions, constituting what Hughes calls a socio-technical system. It had high momentum, force, and direction because of its institutionally structured nature, heavy capital requirements, supportive legislation, and the commitment of know-how and experience. I almost said expertise, which could have worked as well. Similarly, the automobile achieved technological momentum, not as an isolated machine, but a part of a system that included road building, driver education, programs, gas stations, repair shops, manufacturers of spare parts, and new forms of land use that spread out the population into suburbs that, practically speaking, were accessible only to cars and trucks. So I'm going to stop there. The last bit we were reading really reminds me of something Barack Obama said. He said, we didn't build this, meaning the roads and infrastructure, that it was built by previous generations, by previous technological innovators, inventors, and the like. He was highly criticized for that because it was taken out of context by his opponents, meaning that Americans could not take credit for American achievement. But what he in fact meant was that the achievement was built on the achievements of the past, and all of that achievement should be respected and acknowledged. Anyways, I hope this is a little bit helpful. I'm worried that it might not be because it's so dense, but let's see what you think.